Howdy folks, I just returned from the Wasteland Jamboree, a Fallout fan event that took place in Sutton, West Virginia. I joined the cosplay contest, and this is my first ever doing something like that, and guess what? I won Best in Show. A lot of the credit for that win goes to my functional laser musket, and if you're interested in that project, there'll be a link to that at the end of the video, or you can check out the description below. Now this video is going to be a deep dive into all the tiny details that I put into my costume that accommodated the weapon, which was the Minuteman General. You can use the chapter markers below to jump to any part of the costume you may be interested in. And now here's a quick overview of the features. It has a game-accurate design. It's made from real materials, a wool coat, steel-clad armor, real leather tricorn hat, harnesses, spats, belts, and gloves. It has authentic aging on much of the costume by utilizing vintage parts, has a hands-free flag holder, and a functional radio to go with everything. Now, I did a 3,100 mile road trip for this event, driving out from Austin, Texas to Sutton, West Virginia, and I want to give you a little bit of an overview of the Wasteland Jamboree event. It's a fan-run event. The first 4 took place in Good Springs, Nevada, officially called Mojave Mayhem, and I attended last November as a Vault Tech scientist, and I was amazed at all the costumes that everyone had put together. And then when they announced the event in West Virginia, I immediately got tickets and committed to completing my costume. I'd actually started this before the Mojave Mayhem last November, but was able to get this completed for the May event. Now, before we jump into the costume, let's cover a little bit of the cosplay contest that took place at the Wasteland Jamboree. I think there were around 15 folks who participated in the contest. I'm sorry that I didn't manage to get photos of every single one of them. There were a few streams of the contest out there, so I'll try to link those below. I do want to say that everyone there did an amazing job, whether you were in the contest or not. There were some absolutely incredible costumes from folks. Power armor, all sorts of vault dwellers, and then every faction from the game had somebody representing them, which was really absolutely awesome. If you get a chance to visit one of these events, it is worth it just to go and see what creative people have put together. And so, without further ado, let's get into the details of my Minuteman General costume. Like I said, I'd actually been working on this laser musket for over a year, and creating the weapon, and I needed something to go with it to show it off. And of course, since the Minutemen are the faction that use the laser musket, I knew I wanted to do a costume from that faction. So I decided to go for the highest rank of the Minutemen. Now, I found a few folks who have taken a crack at the General, and I use them as inspiration, and I'll link to a few of the projects below. Because I have this desire to keep as much of the costume lore accurate as possible, I booted up the game and started a detailed plan for each aspect of the costume. I guess I should briefly cover who the Minutemen are and who the General is. In the game Fallout 4, there's a faction called the Minutemen. They're a militia formed in the spirit of the Minutemen existed during the Revolutionary War. In the game, the Minutemen are a broken faction with very few members, and you're introduced to them by pressing Garvey, everyone's favorite forced side quest distributor. Over the course of the game, you can help the Minutemen. Eventually, you'll be given the rank of General, leader of the Minutemen, and given access to this General's uniform. At the Jamboree, I believe I was the only General. There might have been 1 or 2 others, but they weren't in the full get-up. There were probably about a dozen or so Minutemen that I met, so the numbers work out to the same as what you see in the game. I used the in-game screenshots along with exports from NIF scope to plan the armor, and I'll show various shots during the video to compare the in-game design to my final result. As with the laser musket, I'll start at one end of the costume and work my way down. So let's start at the top with the hat. The hat was one item which was quite hard to find. Tricorn hats are not themselves hard to find. Most any party store has a plastic Jack Sparrow hat you can just grab. But genuine hats of the time were actually made from wool, treated with waxes and resins to the point that they looked like leather. And then leather tricorn hats are a little bit more common to find, but finding the correct overall look was a bit tricky. I searched and ended up finding this great hat made by Medieval Collectibles. It had the correct X-shaped stitching, the right central shape, and it was made from real leather. The real leather was important to me as I wanted to age the hat myself, not just with paint, but scratches, stains, and overall wear. And usually leather also forms better to your own shape. I did find that this particular hat was still quite stiff, even after treating it with oil, hot water, and lots of time on my head. I did still have to wear a headband under the hat to make it more comfortable. However, at least I used my Good Spring Saloon headband that I got last November. Unlike the hat, the white shirt was quite easy to find. To match what you see in the game, the collar of the shirt needed to be low. This is apparently called a mandarin collar. The other detail that was required was black buttons. I found a shirt on Amazon that fit the bill, and it came in my size. I bought a few of them so I could have a distressed version for the contest and a clean version to wear to the gala dinner. I did find that the shirt would ride up under all the layers, and that unfortunately shows up during this video a little bit sometimes. But during the event, I used shirt stays. I hadn't heard of these before, but they're basically upside down suspenders that tie the bottom of your shirt to your socks. And I also added a low cut undershirt that has blue that kind of matches the coat. This hides better under the belt than a white shirt. The neckerchief is a small but important detail. You see, the wool coat is actually itchy, and so the low collar ends up right next to your neck. And so the neckerchief protects your neck while providing a little bit of style. It is made from a simple, low-cost black cotton bandana. Surrounding the collar are 8 stars, 4 on each side. These are simple, low-cost pins that have a bright gold finish. I left them bright, of course, because real gold doesn't tarnish. I bent over the pins instead of using the clamp backer that they come with, as it was much lower profile this way and doesn't catch on your neckerchief. However, during the event, and even during this video, I kept getting demoted as stars fell off. Fortunately, I did bring spare stars with me. Before we cover the coat, we're going to talk about the sling. In-game, it's clearly made from 2 different layers of leather with a buckle near the star, and I knew I wanted to use a regular 1.5-inch belt for the topmost layer, as this fit the scale of the radio perfectly. I cut up my own old leather belt for this. And then the second layer is a bit thicker, a 1.75-inch wide belt. I purchased new belts for this layer. The 2 layers are attached to each other using screw rivets and other hardware. For the buckle, I searched eBay for something old and authentic, but I could never quite find the right style, so I actually ended up with a new buckle I purchased off Amazon that fit the look. And at the top of the sash is a connection point for the flag carrier, and the whole thing is constructed to fit my size, but because it's made of belts, I can kind of adjust it as I need to. For the radio that's attached to the sash, I wanted something functional, while this actually turned into a whole side project. You see, I wanted my own theme music to be playing as I marched around the event. When you first turn on the radio, it plays the Minutemen station from Fallout 4. It's a jaunty string melody with all the mids you could ask for. The radio contains thousands of songs and dozens of stations, and I actually have released the files if you would like to make one of these yourself. Before making the 3D model of the radio, I had to determine scale. I compared the in-game model to the belt size. The screws are real, as well as the switch, and the rest is custom 3D modeled and printed in solid SLS nylon. The belt slips behind the radio, and the 2 halves are held together by the screws on the front. The toggle switch on the front is the same style toggle switch I used on my Vault-Tec dosimeter project. And the whole thing is programmed in CircuitPython. Internally, the radio is running on an Adafruit prop maker. This is the same module that's also running the laser musket. It's a great little board with a speaker driver and battery charger on board, and the speaker is a high quality, even weatherproof 3-watt driver. I added an internal SD card so you can fit as much music as you desire, and for the event, it was Minuteman 24/7. I always got a kick out of folks trying to determine why, or more accurately, where they were hearing music playing from. It was just another way to enhance the cosplay. And like I said, if you want to build one of these yourself, I've released the project files for personal use. Links are in the description. Now let's talk about the most expensive and difficult to source part of this project, the coat. For months, on and off, I would search the internet for the correct coat, always finding something that was close but never quite spot on. I think at one point I had at least a dozen different ones bookmarked. You see, the coat isn't an American Revolutionary War coat. Neither is it a British coat. The game designers made something that's a mix of a few different coats. In the end, I ended up contacting an Etsy seller that had something that was close, but actually also offered custom fitting, not just sizes. I sent them the reference images I had and my measurements, and the custom made the coat to fit me. Now, there were some issues. The coat ended up arriving as really dark black instead of the navy blue with hunter green flyouts. So there was a couple of issues with the coat, but the overall pattern and fit were correct to the game, and it did fit my body. I didn't have time for them to remake it to my requested specs, so I decided to try re-dyeing the coat myself. The wool was apparently acid dyed, as almost nothing worked to strip the color, even bleach. OxyClean was the only chemical that lightened up the coat. I had to boil huge pots of water and use insulated rubber gloves and churn the coat in the hot water. After quite a bit of work, the coat finally lightened up to a navy blue, except for during that whole process, the rear seam of the coat had ripped all the way up to the collar. And I only had a few weeks before I was headed for the event. Fortunately, I found a local tailor who managed to fix the coat in just a few days. They actually said the original stitching would have given way if I ever moved my arms, and they repaired other aspects of the coat, so I appreciate that. In the end, the coat held up well. In fact, the wool surface is so tough that aging it was actually quite difficult. The gloves were another item that required an extensive search. They needed to be gauntlet gloves, either dark brown or black, and of a medium length, and with a few other small details. At first, I bought the popular gauntlet gloves you'll find on Amazon. I found their quality to be okay, but they were painfully thin, the cuffs were too long, and the three stripes screamed, "These are made for Darth Vader," because that's what they were for. A few other gloves on eBay and Etsy were too long, or the gauntlets were large enough to hide a dinner plate. So finally, while showing this issue to one of my friends, he mentioned that he wears gauntlet gloves while riding his motorcycle. He showed the gloves to me, and they were perfect, with over a decade of authentic aging already in place. So I stole them from him. Well, I bought a new old stock pair off eBay and gave those to him in exchange. They turned out to be Harley-Davidson riding gloves in a women's medium size. They were a bit tight at first, but as they're leather and with a bit of hot water, I was able to get them to fit perfectly. Under the coat sits the combat armor. This was the second side project I did for this cosplay. I started by looking at what others had done. I 3D printed one of the popular models of armor from Thingiverse, and that at least gave me a sense of the scale, but I found the existing models to be way too thick. They were flat on the backside and were also missing key details. So I booted up NIF Scope and extracted my own images of the armor. Then in Solid Edge, I created a 3D model using real metal pins, rivets, and mechanical details. I also wanted the lower portion of the armor to hinge, a detail most folks miss. I curved the inside of the armor to fit my body, and finally, as I wanted something authentic, I decided that my armor would be clad in steel. And so using the CAD software, I was able to extract and flatten the surfaces of the armor. I then ordered 0.8mm thick custom laser cut steel plates from Senka Send. Again, this is not sponsored by them. The flat steel plates were hand bent until they fit perfectly over the 3D printed shell. And then using a combination of E6000 and superglue, I bonded the steel to the ABS 3D print. And then metal rivets were actually used to keep the parts aligned during assembly. The side steel pins were glued into place, and the result is a durable armor that is good enough to stop maybe a very small caliber bullet. But the looks on people's faces at the event when you tell them the armor was steel was worth it. The other reason I also chose real metal is that you cannot duplicate that sheen you get off of it. To complete the armor, I painted it green. I then applied painter's tape and used a laser etcher to cut out a perfect star. This is actually a little trickier than you expect because the star had to be pre-distorted in the laser etching software in order for it to look correct after it was bent around the armor's shape. And then I used my glass media blaster to remove the paint where the star was. I aged the rest and polished up the area with the star. the end result is that the armor looks really authentic as the light catches in just the right way. To attach the armor, I ended up purchasing a high quality leather tool harness, and then it was taken apart and modified. The cross straps were flipped around, and I put the buckle and spare leather behind me instead of underneath my arms. And the shoulder pads were actually modified, taken off, and snapped to the back of the armor, providing some valuable padding, as well as rendering that little bit of leather you see above it in the game. And then the tool harness also provided the correct look for the thick kidney belt, which is a secondary belt just above the pants belt. And the harness would also look correct even if I didn't have the coat on over it. Hanging from my kidney belt is my sidearm. I knew I wanted to have a pistol to go with the costume, except for what would a Minuteman carry? Well, a flare gun, of course. In-game, the Minutemen use flares to call in reinforcements, artillery, or you could even use it as a very low damage direct weapon. This became side project number 3, and I have a whole video showcasing the details of the flare gun. For now, here's a brief rundown. It's a visual replica of a German flare gun, the Luch Pistol 34. I made mine accurate to the real-world scale, and it even has functional mechanical details, such as a break-open barrel, moving trigger, and hammer. And for the Jamboree event, I did add the orange tip to stay legal. The pistol hangs inside a leather power drill holster, and I found this holster while hitting up antique stores driving back from the Goodsprings event in 2025. Hanging on my sash below the buckle is my cap container. I printed 100 custom caps to hand out, and I ended up running out of those on the second day, so maybe next year I'll make 200 of them. In either case, the actual container is a vintage leather camera lens case, something again I picked up at an antique store. You see, every time I go on a road trip, I hit as many antique stores as I can find in search for items that look like they belong in Fallout. The Stimpak holder here wasn't something I had on the first day of the event, but I wanted a way to be able to show and carry my Stimpak. It turned out that one of the vendors at the event was also a leatherworker, and he was crafting things right there in his booth. All their stuff was top quality, and I'll have a link in the description for them. If you're interested in the Stimpak itself, it's one of the first props I made, and it is built from real vintage components, and I'll have a video showcasing it linked in the description. But for now, it holds inside this little leather case. While not part of the in-game general uniform, Preston Garvey has a leather bag hanging from his sash. So I wanted something like that to carry stuff at the event. I ended up getting this World War II era Swiss doctor's bag, made from thick leather with super heavy authentic aging. With a bit of conditioner, I was able to get the stiff leather back into working order, and it has 2 loops on the back that fit perfectly onto the sash. Inside, there's 3 pockets, and I used one for my phone, one for swag, and one for some of the caps that I collected. Below the sash is my regular pants belt. This is literally my everyday belt with authentic aging, and it already had the correct style of brass buckle. Now, if you're going to try to hit me below the belt, I'll need some protection. This comes in the form of a codpiece. One key detail is that the leather straps that hold the codpiece to the belt are actually authentic World War II components that I got out of my previous costume. The green pants are simple, smooth denim pants that come in a moss color. Before we go below the knee, let's talk about the flag holder. It bothered me that the Minuteman general uniform doesn't actually have the Minuteman symbol on it anywhere. I had a few iron-on patches, but there was no good place to attach them. So I had the idea, why not carry a flag with me? But who wants to carry a flag all day long in your hands? Well, this guy from Austin, Texas. By the way, his costume was incredible. But no, I needed my hands free to show off the heavy laser musket. So I set out to design a hands-free flagpole that I could strap to my body. I took a scrap pole that I had from a previous project. It's actually a super light carbon fiber reinforced aluminum pole. The top carabiner attaches to a loop positioned on my sash just above my shoulder, and the lower end of the pole is attached to a leather strap. The strap wraps around my leg just above the knee. For the actual flag, I purchased a high-quality cloth Minuteman flag from Etsy. The result, however, is that I can walk around as both the general and flag bearer of the Minutemen. The lower legs of the in-game model are quite messy, and the details are hard to see. However, I determined that the right leg was a Ranger-style spat over a boot rather than a single hole boot. And after some searching, I came across an Etsy seller that carried real leather spats. I contacted them and they made me some custom fit, shorter Ranger style that fit perfectly over my boots, and they did an incredible job delivering some soft but tough leather spats. The best part is that if you keep some of the buckles a bit loose, you sound like a cowboy with spurs that jingle as you walk around. Speaking of cowboys, the spats sit over my own cowboy boots. And I've worn these boots for over a decade, so they're aged enough to use in the wasteland, and form perfectly to my feet. And some of the mud on these boots are even from Good Springs 2025. That covers all the details of my Minuteman general costume, but before I go, I want to share some details with you from my Wasteland Jamboree trip. First of all, I planned a whole 2-week long road trip themed around Fallout, at least as close as I could make it along the way. I stayed at unique places, such as a tiny cabin, a 1950s bus on a mule farm, and a 1930s teepee. I hit antique stores every day in search of Fallout items, and I visited a few of the real game, in-game locations along the way. Of course, the Wasteland Jamboree was the goal of the whole trip. The first day of the event was a bit chilly, but not too bad. I walked around the crowds and handed the laser musket to anybody who wanted to see it. Many folks were just surprised as I'd hand it over, but it was a blast to see the looks on their face as they tried to hold the 12-pound gun. Their faces would reach another level of amazement as they cranked and charged the laser, listened to the sounds, and hearing the satisfaction of it firing. I was even able to show the gun to Old Man Liver, who owns the Pioneer Saloon, and is one of the creators of the event. At midday, the costume contest was held. We all walked out onto the stage for judging, and the judging criteria was lore accuracy, prop construction, use of materials, and special effects. Each of these criteria was already a key aspect of my design from the beginning. There were 3 judges, and this wonderful woman who was running the contest. After all the contestants were announced, they called my name as Best in Show. It was an incredible feeling and a bit of a relief after all of this effort that it paid off. I won a swag bag with caps and a mug, as well as $300 cash, which I spent on the road trip home, again buying more antiques to expand my collection. So I want to say thank you to everyone who participated and staffed the Wasteland Jamboree event. You made it all worth it. There would be no reason to make cosplay if no one was able to see it. My favorite part of the whole event was meeting people, seeing what they put together, from the very simple to the ultra complex. To me, they're all valid and unique. So go out and make whatever you want and share it with the world. And as always, thanks for watching. So there isn't much audio besides my voiceover because of this bird up here. Has just been singing away, mocking away. Very annoying. So let's see if this guy will work.